It's time to talk about some soft goods, so let's get into this. Hello there, welcome back to the channel. I am Grand Moff Tony. Now, a question that comes up a lot in the Black series is, what is the best way to represent robes, capes, and the like in this line? Typically, there are three answers to this question. The first answer is to use a soft, malleable plastic. Typically, there are three answers to this question. The first is to use a soft and malleable PVC plastic. The second is to use a more vintage-style vinyl for the cape. And the third is to employ actual fabric soft goods in the figure. Now, I've gone back and forth over the years over which of these methods I prefer. I'm typically not a vintage collector, so vinyl is never really the option that I go for. But when it comes down to PVC versus soft goods, I always kind of landed more on the PVC side. I had just come from collecting Kai Play Art's 10-inch DC figures, which always employed PVC when doing capes, robes, and the like when they were doing their DC figures, and so coming back to the Black series and discovering figures that had actual fabric components, it kind of hit me the same way that chrome used to hit me when I was a Transformers collector. I was like, ugh, don't like that. That's a bit ugly. But I will admit, over the years that I've been collecting Black Series, I have kind of softened to the soft goods argument. Sometimes they look really, really good. Sometimes they really add something to the figure, which is the whole point of using soft goods in the first place. It's to add value to the figure. Back in the Kenner days, nobody was buying the Jawa figure until they added a soft goods component. And then all of a sudden, people wanted the Jawa. So that's what I want to talk about today. I have grabbed 25 random Black Series figures that incorporate soft goods, and we're going to go through them and we're going to rank them. Because I'm a YouTuber in my 30s and I just discovered the whole tier ranking system thing, and how much the algorithm seems to like that kind of video format. So here we are, here's my list, here are my figures. I didn't bother coming up with fancy names for the tiers this time, let's just get cracking, and I've got the figures here in alphabetical order. Let's get into this. First up is the Armorer. Now this is specifically the Armorer from the PulseCon exclusive set that came with a bunch of extras, and namely a kind of soft goods tabard over her shoulders. Now this isn't your traditional soft goods, this isn't fabric, it's kind of it's supposed to look like fur. So this has always kind of fallen middle of the field for me. Like sometimes I look at it and I really like it, and sometimes I look at it looks like some kid's curly haired head and it just kind of repulses me. I think this really is a figure to figure thing because I've seen some that look a lot worse than mine. They look a lot more wiry and they don't really sit. Mine has always kind of sat very naturally. It's never given me a ton of grief and it kind of captures the look that you're going for here. So that to me earns it a spot at the B tier. Up next, Asajj Ventress from the Clone Wars line. Now this is a great figure, and what makes it even better is the soft goods dress that she is wearing in the bottom half of her body. This doesn't hinder articulation, it still enables you to hit some really great fighting poses, which really you want to go for, and I love the material on these soft goods. They are very premium feeling, they don't feel thin, you can't see through the fabric, it's a solid opaque fabric. It looks great. This is going straight to A tier. These are fantastic. Up next is the Empire Strikes Back Boba Fett, specifically the archive re-release. I was never able to track down the original. I grabbed the archive, and it's fine. These are fine soft goods. The reason I like these kinds of soft goods is because they are clearly designed to sit a certain way, and they don't really sit any other way. When I put my Boba Fett figure out on the shelf, I stroked down the soft goods. They fell exactly how I wanted them to fall, and they have stayed there ever since. They don't unfold. They're always going to be falling this specific way. Now I compare this to something like the Bouche Leia archive re-release, which has similar soft goods that just don't work. So Boba Fett for me, it's serviceable, it looks decent, he's going in B tier. Up next is Chirrut Imwe from the Rogue One line. This is kind of what I was afraid of when Asajj Ventress was coming out with soft goods. This kind of thick, doll-like fabric, it just doesn't sit properly. It doesn't look the way Chirrut Imwe's robes look. It looks chunky and clumsy, and then there's this red strip down the front which is very distracting. I don't know, I've always kind of wished that they had done this figure in just PVC and just had like a PVC skirt that you could move out of the way, and maybe it looks a little awkward, but it would definitely look better than this. I don't really care for these soft goods. He's going in C tier. One of my favourite figures, Count Dooku. I absolutely love this figure, and I absolutely love his cape. Not only have they perfectly captured the two-toned style of Count Dooku's cape, but they have also stitched it in such a way that you can fold his cape back over his shoulders for dueling the way that he does in the movies. It is perfect, and every time I look at it, it makes me so happy. Not only that, but they have also achieved this without making the cape bulky. They haven't stitched two kinds of fabric together like they do with some other soft goods that are two-toned. This just looks great, and I'm putting him solidly in A tier. Count Dooku is a fantastic figure. One of the newer figures on this list, Darth Malgus. Now, when you're talking about the Darth Malgus figure, most people overlook the cape and just talk about the hood, but the cape is great as well. With that said, I'm now going to talk about the hood. The hood is perfect. It's one of the best hoods in the entire line. It holds its shape so well and sits perfectly flat on Malgus's head. This is just gold tier soft goods. I absolutely love it. Like I say, the cape is good too, but really it's the hood that sells this figure, and we are putting this solidly where it belongs. He is our first S tier figure. From one Sith Lord to another, we're talking about the brand new Darth Sidious figure. Now, this came out this year. It has a great blend of both molded plastic and soft goods to create his incredibly iconic look, and this is just incredible. I love the robes on this Sidious figure. Previous figures of the Emperor have failed to kind of capture the way that the Emperor's robes hang so heavily from his arms and from his shoulders, but this Darth Sidious figure has brilliantly captured the more regal and poofy looking robes that he wears at the end of Revenge of the Sith. I love the colouring on them, I love the way that they sit, I love the way that they flow down to the ground, and I love the way that they don't inhibit the articulation of this incredibly well articulated figure. It's basically Book of Boba Fett Luke Skywalker underneath all of this. It's a great figure, and you don't lose any of that to the Emperor's robes, which is an issue that perhaps the other Emperor figures that aren't being talked about today but might be talked about in the future haven't quite managed to achieve. This Darth Sidious figure is perfect, and it's going solidly in the S tier. Let's talk about Empire Strikes Back Darth Vader. Now, this is specifically the Vader that came in the first wave of Galaxy packaging. It was my first ever Darth Vader figure, and it is incredible. The way they have combined the multiple layers of soft goods in this figure, it is unbelievable. From the tunic and the skirt, all the way to his incredibly flowing cape. It kind of feels like the cape is weighed down because it just droops perfectly to the floor, exactly the way you want it to. Once again, this fabric is incredibly solid, it's incredibly opaque, you can't see through it. It just creates this incredible black void around Vader's form, and it just enhances the figure and takes it to the next level. I'm going to put it at an A tier rather than an S tier because even though it is perfectly screen accurate and it looks fantastic, sometimes that big long cape in the back is just a little too much to handle. It feels like it goes on for like half an inch too long. The way I pose my Vader figure is I'll usually put all of his soft goods over his head, pose the figure, and then droop the soft goods back down again, because otherwise they will tend to group up and sort of sit under the figure, creating this kind of bulb appearance. So I'm going to put him at an A tier. It's still a fantastic figure, and it is probably the best Vader on the market. It's time to talk about Glavis Ringworld Din Djarin, the best Mandalorian figure in 6-inch scale that you can get, and I will die on that hill. This looks incredible. It took so long to get a soft goods cape on this Mandalorian figure, and when they finally did it, they really nailed it. Similar to that old Boba Fett figure we were talking about, once you get it in its position that you want it in, whether you want it fully draping behind him or whether you want to move it out of the way for the jetpack, it stays where you put it. It doesn't slowly creep back out. Once it's grouped up and hung by the jetpack, it looks fantastic and it stays exactly where you want it to. This is an easy A tier for me. This figure is awesome. Let's talk about the Gamorrean Guard, one of my all-time favorite Black Series figures, and pretty much because of the fact that it has what I like to refer to as the best soft goods in the entire Black Series line. They have created this incredibly authentic animal pelt that he wears around his waist and just looks perfect. Now, I have seen Gamorrean Guard figures from other lines where they've used hair, they've used animal hair, or they've used some other kind of soft good material, and it just looks so wiry and poofy, and it fluffs out. Even a vintage collection Gamorrean Guard that I got with my Rancor set has this problem. Not the Black Series Gamorrean Guard. This pelt sits perfectly on the figure. It perfectly captures the look that you really want this figure to have, and it looks incredible. I'm sitting here gushing about this figure. It's going in the S tier, you know it is. Gamorrean Guard is a perfect figure. Let's talk about some really modern figures. Let's talk about Jedi Master Indara. Now, they did something different with the Jedi robes in the Acolyte figures, with varying levels of success, and we're going to get into that here. Master Indara's robes feel very weightless. They feel very doll-like, and it's very, very surprising to me because we're going to be talking about other Acolyte figures on this list that don't feel that way. And when I looked at the stitch work, I could kind of see what they were going for. When I went back and rewatched the series, I had a look particularly close at the Jedi robes and how they were fashioned, how they looked, and then once you've done that, you actually look at the figure and you can see what they were going for. They were really trying to recreate how these robes sat on the actors. It just didn't work with Indara. It's kind of poofy, weightless, doll-like. It gets in the way of her articulation. The hood is stitched down, which was really bizarre to me because when we first meet Indara, she has her hood all the way up. And that's kind of the look that I wanted to recreate, but I'm not one to take a pair of scissors to my Black Series figures. So this one didn't really work for me. It's going to go in the D tier because I'm still trying to figure out a way to make this robe look good on the figure, and I haven't quite achieved it yet. Switching gears, let's talk about Jedi Master Sol from the same line with marginally better soft goods. Sol's robes sit very naturally on the figure, and if you want to do just a basic neutral standing pose, which you could do, he does that quite a bit in the series, you could probably achieve a very good look. It's when you start going for action poses. Now, I had this image in my head that I was going to get Sol posed up in his fighting form, where he sort of pulls his saber back and he has it off to the side. I've been unable to recreate that look, not because the articulation is not there, the articulation is very much there, but because Sol was wearing his robes when he was in that fight, and I would like to recreate that, but I can't. They won't sit the way I want them to. Once again, the hood is also stitched down. Very, very strange choice there, but I'm going to put this at a C because the robes are slightly better when he's standing in a neutral pose. It's just the action poses that are kind of suffering from these particular soft goods. You see already, we've got two figures from the same line, and they have vastly different soft goods that have come out very, very differently. It's time to talk about what I consider to be the worst soft goods in the entire Black Series. I'm talking about Throne Room Kylo Ren from The Last Jedi. The very first thing I did with these soft goods was take them off, put them in my accessory box, and replace them with the much more reliable, much more screen accurate PVC robe from the single figure release. These soft goods are dreadful. There's no good way to put it. I mean, they've tried to capture what looks to me like a very leather-style cape in traditional fabric soft goods, and it just doesn't work. They have no weight. They don't hang to the floor. They kind of group up around the figure and sort of sit weightlessly on his shoulders. That's why they had to go. These soft goods are not good at all. These are the kind of soft goods that I think of when I think of of bad soft goods in this line. Throne Room Kylo is an easy D tier when it comes to his soft goods, which is a shame because he's an easy A tier when it comes to the rest of the figure. But we're talking about the soft goods, so he's going in D. Let's talk about another Kylo Ren figure. Let's talk about Kylo Ren Unmasked. Specifically, I'm talking about the one that came in the SDCC set, which I recently picked up on my Kentucky toy hunt. Now, Force Awakens Kylo Ren figures are pretty much, if you've seen one, you've seen all of them, because the soft goods are always the same. You have a soft goods tunic and robe over the top of PVC kind of thigh flaps that go underneath the figure to kind of give it the shape. They also have a PVC scarf and shawl with a soft goods hood. And it's the soft goods hood that loses me, because the rest of the figure looks great. Those robes perfectly capture Kylo's look from the first movie, and the decision to have the shawl be PVC also looks good because it sits in exactly the position you want it to. Very screen accurate, very true to the actual appearance of the character. The hoods, on the other hand, I don't know if there's not enough fabric, there's too much fabric. This is an old figure, so they hadn't yet figured out the Malgus thing of gluing down the corners of the hood to keep the shape. It has no shape, it has no form. Whether you have the hood up or the hood down, it just looks bad. And I know I said earlier that I wasn't one to take scissors to my figures. I've been sorely tempted to take a pair of scissors to just lop the hood off the back of this figure, because I feel like it will enhance the figure to remove it. So I'm kind of torn on this one. The robes and the tunic look incredible, the hood does not. And this is true of all Force Awakens Kylo Ren figures. They all have the same problem. So I'm going to put it very middle of the road at B tier, because the rest of the figure looks so good, and I feel like if they hadn't done the hood, if they had just left the hood out, it would be such a better figure. So B tier for Kylo Ren Unmasked. Imperial Light Cruiser Luke Skywalker. I love these soft goods. They look incredible. They've kind of captured the mass and the shroud of the Darth Vader figure, and it sits so perfectly on Luke Skywalker to make him look very, very menacing. Now, I have some issues with the way that my personal hood is stitched. It doesn't always sit the way I want it to do, but it does get out of the way very, very well if you just want to take the hood off and just have him be in the robe. With that being said, it does feel very much like a specific QC issue on my figure, because I've seen other people really take this figure to the next level with the robe and with the hood up as well. So I'm going to slap this at an A tier because it feels like a great figure. I just feel like maybe I got a dodgy one in terms of the hood. Farm Boy Luke. Now, when I spoke on Reddit to people about this topic, this is a figure that came up a lot in the comments as the worst soft goods in the Black Series. And you know what? Yeah, I can kind of see where you're coming from though. Now, while I still think that Throne Room Kylo is worse, I can see the arguments on this weird toilet paper looking outfit that just looks bizarre. And I know why they had to do it. They had to do it for the land speeder, because I guess if they gave him a plastic sculpted tunic, he wouldn't go in the land speeder. Maybe, possibly. I don't know. I guess we'll find out when the new one comes out. I've got two of this figure. I've got the one that comes with the land speeder, and I've got the Power of the Force single card release, and both of them are just dreadful. It's bad, bad soft goods. They are bad soft goods, and they're going in the D tier. I'm really glad that this figure is getting a redo. I hope we can have the same set of the Princess Leia from the same line. Tibidon Station Obi-Wan Kenobi was a figure that came up a lot in the Reddit post as a lot of people's least favorite soft goods. And sometimes, yeah, I can kind of see where you're coming from. The poncho is very awkward. It doesn't look like the poncho in the show, which is very off-putting. And it gets even worse when you try to pose the figure in an action pose. And I mean, yeah, sure, you can make the argument that he wasn't in any action poses when he was dressed like this, but it's an action figure, it comes with a lightsaber, people are going to want to pose it that way. Weirdly enough, I found the thing that makes these soft goods work is the backpack. I managed to trap part of the poncho under the backpack strap, and since I did that, it sits perfectly, like exactly the way I want it to. So I'm kind of torn on this one, because I do see where a lot of people are coming from with their intense dislike of this figure. But to me personally, I feel like I've got a really good one, and I found a really good workaround for it. So I'm gonna kind of best of both worlds this. I'll stick it at a C tier. Mine looks fine, but I get where you're coming from. I feel like this is gonna be a very similar discussion. Wandering Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi is another one that comes up a lot on the Reddit post about bad soft goods. And for the longest time, I didn't get it, because my Wandering Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi is on display. I love this figure so much, and I do really like his robes, but I feel like where the drop-off is happening is with the hood. And the hood, I get it. I 100% get it. If you have the hood down, it looks fine. You can kind of flatten it against the body, it doesn't stick out, it looks okay. But if you want to capture the way Obi-Wan looks in that first episode when he's going to board the ship to leave Tatooine, you can't do it with this figure because the hood sits so weightlessly and so lifelessly over the head. It kind of sticks up into a kind of a triangle shape, which is kind of alarming, and I don't like it at all. It doesn't have any weight to it, it doesn't sit flat on the head. So yeah, I see where you're coming from with this, and even though I like my Obi-Wan figure, and even though I have him on display, particularly because I like the way the soft goods look, I've got the hood down, and that means I'm gonna put it in a C tier because I get it. I do get it. The slave outfit Princess Leia. This was one of the earliest examples of soft goods in the Black Series, and it is not good. It's not a good figure. It doesn't look like the costume at all. This is supposed to be a very light, very thin, very kind of satin-looking piece of material hanging from her waist. It's supposed to look like that, and it doesn't look like it in the figure at all. It just looks flat and like a sheet of card that you get from maybe a cereal box. It doesn't look good at all. And when you go to actually pose the figure sitting with Jabba, like everyone wants to have their Slave Leia figure, I have to call it what it is. It's a cardboard tabard that she has at the front of the figure. It just gets in the way. And as bad as it is in the front, it is worse in the back. It's just not a good looking piece of material. These are not good looking soft goods. This is not a good looking figure. It's going solidly in the D tier. And we are on a roll with these bad soft goods Princess Leia figures. We're looking at the New Hope Princess Leia. Now this is, again, one of the most notorious figures in the line because it just doesn't capture the look of her costume. It just looks like she's wearing the sheet that Michael Myers wears when he's trying to dress up as a ghost. It's just formless and lifeless. It takes all of the femininity out of this figure. You can't pull off classic Princess Leia poses with this because the soft goods just look awkward and oversized and doll-like, and I don't like it at all. It's going in the D tier, and I'm done talking about it. Again, hopefully this figure will be vastly improved by the new sculpted version of it. We shall have to wait and see, because right now this one is kind of embarrassing. Supreme Leader Snoke. Now this was a figure that I avoided for a very long time because when he came out and when I was starting to collect Black Series figures, I was still very prejudiced against soft goods figures, especially figures that were entirely soft goods, like their entire costume was captured in soft goods. And that's part of the reason why for the longest time I had the Elite Series Supreme Leader Snoke as my quote-unquote Black Series Snoke. That all changed when I finally tracked down that version of Supreme Leader Snoke on his throne, because that is an incredible centerpiece for any display and any collection, and it is 1000% down to the fact that he's wearing a soft goods cloak. What's interesting about the Supreme Leader Snoke figure, and particularly the soft goods, is they don't look anything like the final rendered costume from the movie. They have a very different style to them, they have a very different material, and they sit a very different way on the figure than the CG costume sits on the CG model. But what's interesting here is I don't care, which is weird to say because I have said previously that what's wrong with this soft goods is it doesn't look like the movie. This one, I know it doesn't, but it has its own unique style to it that I actually really like. And I can't really figure out why. I really can't pin down why it's okay that those soft goods look totally different, but those soft goods on the Princess Leia figure are part of the reason why I don't like it very much. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the figure wouldn't wouldn't sit on the throne if it didn't have these soft goods. And then the fact that they don't really seem to have tried to capture the screen image. They've just kind of done their own thing with Snoke's weird looking gold member dressing gown. I kind of respect it. I kind of dig it. It looks really, really cool. That being said, I'm not going to go and put it up the top of the tier list. I'm going to stick it solidly in the middle of the road at B tier. And hopefully somebody out there can see where I'm coming from, because I know it doesn't look like the movie, I know it doesn't look like the costume, but it kind of has its own unique style, and I kind of dig it. The Tusken Raider. Now, this is a figure that really, if you're not going to use soft goods, you're not going to capture what you want out of this character, because they are pretty much just all soft goods. And the way that the Tusken Raider figure meshes the soft plastic PVC with the soft goods overlay perfectly captures the look of the Tusken Raiders. I think this looks fantastic. I think it's brilliant. You can pull off the over the head if you want to do that. You can get gun poses with their rifles. It's exactly what you want. It doesn't hamper the figure at all, and it really adds something to it. Now, something I see a lot of people complain about on this figure is that the soft goods tends to fray and come apart at the edges, but I think that just adds to the aesthetic of the figure. It looks run down, it looks rough, it looks like it's been living in a desert, and I really appreciate that. This is going straight to A tier. Up next, and I'm going to feel terrible for this, Vice Admiral Holdo. Now, one of our best friends loves this figure because it's Laura Dern, and it's a great likeness. The likeness on the figure is incredible. The soft goods are dreadful. She's just wearing a towel. It's that weird kind of material that you get on the Slave Leia figure where it's just kind of, it looks like a cardboard tube, and I don't like it at all. I think the thing that annoys me the most about the soft goods on this is that the costume from The Last Jedi is absolutely gorgeous, and you can see bits of that around the collar on the figure. You've got sculpted plastic for the neck piece that looks all ripply and great, and I love it, and they captured the back of the dress with the parts that were hanging also in PVC, and they look great, but miring this whole look is this weird pink tube that she's wearing from the neck down, and it sits very high on the figure, so it obstructs your view of the beautifully sculpted plastic around the neck. As I say, I feel terrible for doing it because he loves this figure, and yet it's going in the D tier because these are solidly dreadful soft goods, and I have been desperately seeking an alternative ever since I picked up the figure, and I haven't found it yet. So right now, she's going in the D tier. I'm sorry. And finally, I want to talk about Yord Vandar because he has the best soft goods that I have encountered in the Acolyte wave so far. I am currently 4 out of 6. I just have to track down May and Jackie. I've heard good things about the soft goods on the May figure, but the soft goods on the Yord are next level. The sleeves actually hang from the wrist. The hood doesn't interfere with the shape and style of the figure, and the soft goods in general do not hamper the articulation or the posability of this figure. You can pull off all kinds of fight poses with it, and the cloak just looks natural. This is perfect. We are ending on a high. I'm sticking Yord in the S tier because these soft goods are perfect. I don't understand how it's done so well on the Yord figure. It looks like the same style on the Saul and the Indara, but they just don't work. Yord, however, absolutely perfect. So there you have it. That was a tier list ranking 25 random Black Series figures on their soft goods. So let me hand this subject off to you. What are some of your favorite examples of soft goods in the Black Series? What are some examples that maybe you wish they had done plastic instead? Or maybe what's something that is plastic, it is PVC, and maybe you think they could have pulled off the soft goods? Let me know down below. I'll be very interested to hear from all of you. And this is going to be a list that we're going to come back to because I had to stop at 25 for time, but I want to get through more and more of these. I want to do more and more of these videos and just build out this list because I feel like it's going to be a good one. You can also access the template for this tier list yourself. It's under my profile on tiermaker.com. Go and have a look and send me your versions all day long. I love it. I think it's fantastic. In the meantime, however, I've been Grand Moff Tony. That was ranking the Black Series soft goods. You may subscribe when ready. Easy deer tier. Oh my god, deer tier? Slow down. Alright. Oh my god. The costume. And